Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals Done Alive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host, Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, all the things, so please come find me. Today we're covering a super well-known case. I'm sure that you've heard of him, and if not, then I'm honored to be your first podcaster where you've heard about John Wayne Gacy. So let's get right into it with the killer clown. John was born March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. John was the middle child and he had two sisters, and his parents were John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robinson. John had a very close relationship with his sisters and his mother, but his relationship with his father was always very strained. John Sr. was an auto machinist and a World War I veteran, but he was also an alcoholic and abusive towards his family. John stated that one of his earliest memories was of his father beating him at age 4 for disarranging some car engine parts. John's father really targeted him because he had a heart condition, so he was never athletic and was always a sickly child. When John was 11, he was hit by a swing, and as a result, a blood clot formed in his brain which caused blackouts. John's father would constantly accuse John of faking his ailments for attention. John also said that he always yearned for his father's acceptance. John Sr. was constantly obsessed with masculinity and being overall a masculine man. And unfortunately for John, due to his lack of athleticism, being sickly, and genuinely getting along with his sisters and his mother, he just did not fit the ideal son of what John Sr. expected from him. When John was a child, he said that a close family friend was molesting him, but he never said anything because he was afraid that he'd be blamed for it. After John graduated high school, he moved to Las Vegas and started working at a mortuary as a custodian. While working there, he slept at the mortuary and admitted to climbing into the coffins and sleeping next to the dead bodies. Eventually, he would move back to Chicago with his mother, where he enrolled in Northwestern Business College and graduated in 1963. After graduating, he got a job with a shoe company and he was transferred to the Illinois capital of Springfield. He quickly became a manager and found a fiancée and a coworker, Marilyn Myers. The couple would marry in September 1964. Soon after, John would join the Junior Chamber of Commerce, the nationwide organization dedicated to building leadership and business skills, amongst the members more casually known as the JC. It was through the JC that John had his first gay experience. John and a male coworker got drunk, and the coworker convinced John to perform oral sex on him. And I guess John had said that this was a huge awakening for him. But not only did he realize that he was not straight, he also realized that that was not enough for him. He had more depraved acts that the sleeping in the morgue had given him a clue to, but he wasn't sure about until now. Very soon after that first experience, John and his wife moved to Iowa. Marilyn's father owned 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, and he offered John a management position. In February of 1966, Marilyn gave birth to their son, and their daughter was born 1 year later. John had said that 67 and 66 were pretty much the happiest time in his life. He felt like he had everything. He had a wife, he had a home, he had 2 children, he had a good job. He felt like he had the American dream, as most people would put it. After John had moved to Iowa, he once again got involved with the Waterloo JC chapter and rose through the ranks once again. It was said that the JCs in the Waterloo chapter were very promiscuous. They threw parties with prostitutes and even made stag videos Many of the members were swingers and would swap spouses. There was just a lot going on behind closed doors that most people didn't know about. All while John was participating in these crazy parties, he was also a manager at KFC and insisted that everyone call him the Colonel. And it wasn't long before Gacy would commit his first sexual assault. John lured Donald Voorhees, the son of a fellow JC member, with the promise of booze and explicit content on March 1968. John got him very drunk and forced him to perform oral sex on him. John then threatened the boy into silence and continued to pursue teenage boys, often ones that worked for him at KFC. Donald Voorhees eventually broke down and told his father about the assault. John was arrested and charged. He denied the allegations and demanded a polygraph test, which he failed. John claimed that Donald's father was out to get him for political reasons, and he would even hire someone to assault Donald so he wouldn't testify, but he was found out and was charged for this as well. During the hearing, the judge ordered John to take a psychiatric evaluation, and doctors concluded that he had an antisocial personality disorder. John did end up admitting to having sex with the victim, but he said it was consensual. The jury didn't believe him, and on December 3rd, 1968, John was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Soon after his conviction, John's wife, Marilyn, divorced him and he never saw her or his children again. In the winter of 1969, at the Omarosa State Penitentiary, Gacy quickly developed a reputation as a model prisoner. John's father passed from heart failure while he was in prison, and John didn't take it well. He had said that his father died of shame that he had gone to prison. Even though John was sentenced to 10 years, he only served 18 months and was released on parole. He moved back in with his mother. Then in February 1971, John was charged with the sexual assault of another teenage boy. The boy claimed that John picked him up from the Greyhound bus station. John took him to Chicago and tried to grape him. However, the charges were dropped when the victim didn't appear in court. The Iowa Board of Parole was never notified about the incident, even though this was a clear violation of his parole. Just as a side note, don't you just hate stuff like this? It seems to happen a lot where there's oversights, things aren't notified. It could have helped save so many people. In the fall of 1971, John would buy a house in Chicago that would become the House of Horrors. After purchasing his new home, he got engaged to longtime friend Carol Huff. Her and her 2 daughters moved in with John, despite her knowing about his prison sentence. And this is just something that I will not understand, and I refuse to understand. If you know that a man has been convicted of abusing children, why on earth would you move your children in with a man like that? There's no excuse for that. I am going to judge you hardcore if you put your children at risk like that. Don't do that. John would start up a construction business that took off. He primarily hired teenage boys under the pretense that they were cheaper to pay. Several boys came forward about being assaulted, but John would manipulate his way out of the situation. John also began volunteering for the Democratic Party. He hosted parties and tried to come off as this upstanding family man. And then on January 2nd, 1972, 16-year-old Timothy McCoy missed his Greyhound bus transfer, and the next bus wouldn't be there for 10 hours. John pulled up and offered to show Timothy around Chicago and a bed to sleep in, and Timothy accepted. According to John, the next morning, he woke up to find Tim standing in his bedroom brandishing a knife. John leapt to his defense. They got into a wrestling match. John straddled Tim and stabbed him multiple times in the chest. John said that when he went downstairs, he saw breakfast was made and he realized that Tim wasn't trying to kill him. John would go on to say that he would bury Tim's body in the crawl space of the house. I don't know that I believe John that Timothy's death was an accident, because while he says that it was an accident, he saw him holding a knife, I still don't think that that's necessarily your first reaction to just go ahead and unalive somebody. He also said that this was the biggest sexual thrill that he had ever had before after killing Timothy. So I don't think I believe him that this is what actually transpired. John wouldn't kill another person until January of 1974, but again, he said that this first murder awakened something in him. Then one day in 1975, after having intimacy with his wife Carol, he sat down and told her that we would never be doing that ever again. And as a result, they divorced. With John's wife out of the house, he now had no supervision and was free to do whatever he wanted unchecked. 1975 was the year that John became Pogo and Patches, the clown, which is where he got his nickname, the Killer Clown, from. So I've actually seen his Pogo and Patches clown costume. If you would like to see them, they are at the Alcatraz East Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. They are super creepy. They also have some of John Wayne Gacy's paintings. And I remember even back then, because this was a few years ago, it just felt super negative. There was something just eerie about those costumes, more than them just being creepy anyway. On July 29th, 1975, John was almost caught. One of his teenage employees hadn't been paid in 2 weeks, so the boy went to John's house to confront him, and as a result, he was tricked into being handcuffed, strangled, and buried in the crawl space. One of John's go-to moves would be tricking the boys into being handcuffed. He would either say, like, let me show you a trick, and handcuff him, or handcuff himself and pretend to get him out and pretend to want to show the boys how to get out of the handcuffs. Only once they were handcuffed, it was all over from there. Police questioned John about the boys' whereabouts. John was open about the financial confrontation, but said that they worked it out earlier that day. Police assumed that the boy had just ran away. Then in January of 1977, 19-year-old John Schitz disappeared after going to Gacy's house to sell him his car. John then resold the car to one of his employees, Michael Rossi. At the end of 1976, Rossi was caught stealing from a gas station, and the car was traced back to Gacy. John told the police that John Schitz sold him the car so that way he could leave town, and the police dropped the investigation. John Wayne Gacy would have multiple run-ins with the law, but none of them would result in any real investigation. By 1978, the crawl space in John's house was full of bodies, and there wasn't any more room. He debated storing them in the attic, but was worried about the fluid leaking through the floor. He ended up dumping his last 5 victims in the Des Plaines River off a bridge near his home. The smell in his home was getting worse and worse as well. Some of his employees or the other teenage boys reported that when it rained, it smelled awful. John had perfected luring young men and disposing of their bodies, but one case failed in July of 1975. John visited his 15-year-old employee, Anthony Antonucci, at his house. He gave the boy liquor. John attacked Anthony, wrestling him to the ground and placing handcuffs on him, but he made a mistake by leaving one of the cuffs too loose. Anthony broke free, wrestled John to the ground, and handcuffed him instead. Eventually, John talked Anthony into taking the cuffs off, and he left. David Cram, another one of John's employees, unknowingly helped dig the graves in the crawl space. John explained that the smell was just a sewer pipe that had broken. David actually lived with John in 1976. One day, John tries to do the handcuff trick on David while dressed as Pogo the Clown. After he handcuffs David, he tells him that he's going to sexually assault him and kill him. David fights him off and then continued to live with John. He would make another attempt at David, and at that point, David would leave his home. When I read that, my heart broke for that young man, because how unsafe did he have to feel in his own home, or how alone did he have to feel to stay in a house where he was almost assaulted and it took another attempt for him to leave? It was just super sad to me. On May 22nd, 1978, John lured 26-year-old Jeffrey Wignall into his vehicle where he was chloroformed several times. John told Jeffrey what he was going to do to him, then he was tortured and sexually assaulted. When Jeffrey woke up, he was in Lincoln Park where John had dumped him. Jeffrey was in the hospital for almost a week, and he did report what happened to the police, but they refused to issue an arrest warrant. Jeffrey did claim that there was another man there, so there had been some speculation that John had an accomplice. John also suggested that other people were involved, but there's been no proof to back up this claim. On December 11th, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Piest went to his job at the Nelson's Pharmacy. A man approached Robert while he was working and came back when Robert was finishing his shift. Robert's mother came to pick him up from work, and Robert asked her to wait while he spoke to a man about a new job. Robert never returned, so his parents went to the police, and when they found out that the man was John Wayne Gacy, they asked the police to investigate him. Police questioned John the next day, and they started digging. They found the assault allegations and the 10-year prison sentence. After they finished questioning John, they had detectives tail John while they got an arrest warrant. On December 13th, the warrant came through. Investigators did notice the smell but thought it was a sewage pipe coming from the crawl space. They did, however, find several trinkets from missing teenagers and bloodstains. Police continued to trail John, and apparently this was really bothering him. One minute he'd threaten the officers, and then the next they'd make jokes with them and invite them in for dinner. Michael Rossi called the police and informed them of 2 other suspicious disappearances that happened to be John's employees. Police conducted interviews with both David Cram and Michael Rossi. On December 20th, 1978, John tried to file a civil suit against the Des Plaines Police Department for harassment. John started drinking heavily, then drove himself to his lawyer's office, picked up a picture of Robert, and told them that he was dead and in the river. On December 22nd, 1978, John Wayne Gacy confessed to what he estimated between 25 to 30 murders. John underwent over 300 hours of psychological tests leading up to his trial in 1980. He pleaded not guilty for reason of insanity, claiming that he had schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. The jury didn't seem to buy it, though, and on March 13th, 1982, John Wayne Gacy was sentenced to death. He was sent to the Menard Correction Facility, where he spent 14 years on death row. Over the years, John flip-flopped between having an accomplice or outright denying the crime at all. On May 10th, 1994, at 12:58 a.m., John Wayne Gacy was put to death by lethal injection. His last meal was fried chicken, 12 fried shrimp, French fries, a pound of strawberries, and a Diet Coke. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." 6 of the bodies that were found in John's crawl space still have not been identified, so the case is still technically open. For this last meal, I would say it's a 6 out of 10. It's good, there's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't particularly exciting to me. Strawberries are good, but I think I would have preferred like a nice dessert of some sort, but overall, it was still good. What did you guys think of today's case, guys? I think it's so sad that 6 people still have not been identified. They deserve to be known who they were, and their families deserve closure, and unfortunately, there's still a lot of mystery going on about who they are. Honestly, I am glad that he was put to death. I feel like, especially for things like this is what the death penalty is for. And let me know if you learned any new information about John Wayne Gacy. I know it's a very common true crime story to cover, and I try to do different stories, but you guys have been asking for this one, so I figured I would go ahead and do it. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!